Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. The forgetful memory expert. She was a great witness, except for that little detail that she could not remember. The irony of that really got the prosecutor amused and upset the defense, which then got everybody more aggressive with the objections, with the questions, until finally the judge became very much not amused. And he halted the whole case for a break, saying the case had become unhinged. So happy Friday, everybody. Today, we are going to be covering the final action-packed 2 days of the trial as the defense put on the final part of its case, and we are now on the downhill slope toward a jury verdict. We're going to cover the entire defense case today. I'm going to give you a short summary so you can get the whole defense case and understand where they're headed and what their arguments were. And we are going to specifically look at that issue of the expert witness. You're actually going to see it. I pulled out the expert excerpt so you can see the witness as what she couldn't remember. You can see the objections. You can see what the prosecutor asked, and you can finally see the judge say, look, this is unhinged. Close the proceedings entirely for a few minutes to give everybody a chance to take a break. So we're going to be covering 4 topics today. The first is that expert witness and what happened when the judge said the case became unhinged. The second is the witnesses who were brought to say that Fotis was very happy with the way things were going and starting to go in his favor in the custody dispute with Jennifer Dulos. Third is several witnesses introduced extra facts that were important to the defense. The fourth, we're going to cover what's next. Now, the case we're talking about is the case of Michelle Troconis. She is accused of conspiring to murder the wife of her boyfriend. He had been separated from the wife, Fotis Dulos had, for almost 2 years. Jennifer and Fotis had split apart. Michelle now lived with Fotis. Fotis was accused of the murder, of actually committing the murder, but since he is no longer alive, he's no longer around to face the charges. It's Michelle who's currently on trial. She's charged with conspiring with Fotis to kill Jennifer. Technically, Jennifer's body has never been found. She was a mom of 5, drove her kids to school, and then just disappeared into thin air. Her car left parked on the side of a park not far from her home. And that's the last that anyone ever heard of her. And so that's the case that we're covering. Let me go ahead and say thank you to Marlon, who gifted a lawyerly membership. I so appreciate that. We're having a blast with the memberships. Please join us in that. To clarify, there are 3 things you can do that really help the channel. The first is super easy. Just hit the like button. Liking this video helps it get out to more people. And the second thing is you can subscribe to come back for more videos, and that helps the channel. The third thing is you can become a member, and we have special emojis that you can use that are part of what we use in the chat and things that we use as part of our feedback in the chat. So we'd love to have you for all of those. And let's get started. The expert where it all went unhinged. By far, the most entertaining part of the defense, I thought, was the testimony of Professor Elizabeth Loftus. She's a professor at the University of California in Irvine, an experimental psychologist who specializes in eyewitness testimony and memory. She is also, interestingly enough, a professor of law. If you were asked to pick somebody to have an interesting lunch with, she would be a great choice. Intelligent, lots of interesting life experiences. But the funniest part of her testimony was the irony of her, the memory expert, forgetting. And we will get to that. I want to focus first on what she said about the case. I thought it was disappointing that her testimony was very unspecific. It was not always even clear how it fit into the defense. So she started out with discussion. She started out with discussion about how a pressured interrogation can cause someone to change what they say they remember. And let me go ahead and put that in, and I'm going to show you the video.
Person is told repeatedly that they're wrong about their memory. Does that have an effect on people's retention of what they had originally stated?
Yes, I mean, when you tell people they're wrong about their memory, I mean, sometimes people will stick to it anyhow and say, I think you're wrong in telling me I'm wrong. But many times they'll change their memory to try to fix what's wrong.
You mentioned fatigue and stress. Does being put in any kind of pressure, being asserted or exerted on a person, play a role in helping or making it difficult for people to remember accurately?
Well, one of the things I've written about is sometimes in psychotherapy, people are pressured to produce more details about some event, to kind of recount more and more. And so you can sometimes then get very kind of elaborate stories, but these are sometimes creations to respond to the pressure for more details.
So law enforcement did repeatedly tell Michelle she was wrong during her interrogations. We've watched two of the three parts I'm going to do on the series of Michelle. We've still got one left to go. And she was interrogated 3 times, and law enforcement did tell her repeatedly that she was wrong. And in some of the situations, the defense successfully proved during the course of the trial that Michelle had been right and law enforcement had been wrong. They admitted it. They didn't hide it. Like the easiest example I would say would be the rain on the night the night before Jennifer Dulos disappeared. Michelle said there was a thunderstorm. Her daughter called her afraid, and she went to the daughter's room, and that's why she didn't wake up next to Fotis. And law enforcement said, you're wrong. There was no rainstorm. We've checked. And as it turned out, the law enforcement weather information was related to someplace about 24 miles away. It wasn't the actual accurate data for where Michelle lived. So, but what is the defense saying with the witness? Is the witness saying that Michelle made up other memories, like the phone being at the house or Fotis not being there? It wasn't 100% clear exactly, I think, what the defense was doing with this. Now, they can make these arguments in closing argument, and they may put it all together there. Give it just a second, I hope.
Because once these false memories get planted in the mind of somebody who is, comes to honestly believe it happened, they can be very confident about it. They can be very detailed about it. They can even be emotional about it, even though it didn't happen.
Do the studies show whether or not, if that false information is repeatedly conveyed to the person over a period of time, that it sort of cements that false memory?
Yes, repeated misinformation or false information exacerbates the problem.
So the prosecution went straight to this issue on cross-examination, pointing out that Michelle had told them a number of key things, like that Fotis was home on the day of Jennifer's disappearance before she was questioned and pressured by police. So it wasn't as if they had pressured her into saying that. She volunteered that and then later changed that story with police. I think the defense point was that Michelle was pressured by Fotis when they did the timeline together to think that he wasn't home. He said, yeah, don't you remember? We showered together. We were there. Don't you remember? But it wasn't really clear yet how the defense is going to use this. It wasn't clear just from the witness's testimony. So it was sort of frustratingly unspecific. How does the concept of false memories apply to this case? And could they have been saying that Michelle was right the first time, that Fotis was in the house that morning, that they did take a shower together, and that the new memory was one that came about as a result of pressure from law enforcement? I'm honestly not sure exactly what they're going to argue in the closing argument about this. I am sure that the reason they stayed away from being more specific is because it would have brought an objection from the prosecution. The objection would have been that you're getting in the middle of what the jury has to decide. The jury has to decide who to believe, what to believe. You can't tell them who to believe and what to believe. But it did mean that there was a gap, and the prosecution exploited that gap. But by far, the most dramatic part of the testimony centered around an irony that the memory expert couldn't remember. Let's be fair, this was not an expert on how to remember things. So it didn't undermine her testimony, but it certainly started, it was ironic and it started a downward descent. So we're going to watch this together and you can see what it is.
Would you just tell the jury what the title of the book was?
Well, I've published 20 books. Do you want to hand me the CV? And
Well, did you publish more than one book in 1991?
I think only one book in 1991.
So that's
yes.
the one I'm talking about. Would
Okay.
you mind just telling the jury what the title of the book was?
The title of that was Witness for the Defense.
That wasn't the complete title, was it, Doctor?
Well, that was the main part of the title.
So I'll just ask again, that was not the complete title, was it?
Well, there may have been a subtitle, but I don't remember the details. You
Well,
apparently have it, so you can read it
you
to me
don't-
and ask me, is that it?
When you say you don't remember the details, I just want to be clear, you're saying you don't remember the details about the title of a book you wrote?
I don't remember exactly the subtitle.
Now, if I were to show you a photocopy of the cover of your book, do you think that would help you remember what the subtitle was?
Yes.
May I have this marked, Judge?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm just going to ask if you wouldn't just mind reading this assignment to yourself and tell me if that refreshes your recollection as to what the subtitle was.
Yes.
Doctor, what was the subtitle?
Let me think. It was the accused, the eyewitness, and the memory expert on trial or something. Could you show it to me again?
You need to refresh your memory again. Did you say in this book, should a psychologist in a court of
Let me
law
stop
act
it
as
there for just a minute. So you couldn't help but be amused by this. She is the memory expert and she can't remember the title of her own book. Can anybody be sympathetic? I know I can. I thought I can be very sympathetic with that, but it was sort of a funny moment. And then after this, it sort of started a spiral. The objections by the defense got long-winded. We call those speaking objections in law. And most of all, the judge then got really impatient with where the prosecutor went on the questions.
an advocate for the defense or an impartial educator? My answer to that question, if I am completely honest, is both. Do you remember making that statement in your book?
Well, I'll take your word for it that you're reading something I wrote in 1991 that,
Well, doctor, I certainly don't want you to take my word for it, okay? So do you need your memory refreshed again?
well, I don't remember everything I've written in 600 papers and 20 books.
If Mr. McGinnis wants to offer these pages, I'm not objecting, so we could move along and have it being admitted as an exhibit, so.
Well, I'm happy to do that. I just want her to answer my question. Would reading your
What you
own...
want is not relevant, it's not material, and it's not necessary.
Whoa. And the judge kept getting increasingly upset, both with the defense objections and even more with the prosecutor's questions. You're going to see all of that happen here. As for curious me and your question, I did not see that. I'll have to go back and look for that. Thanks for telling me.
Do you think that the reason you don't get hired more by the prosecution is because you've written a book called Witness for the Defense?
I'm going to object speculation
Well, it's
and
argumentative, sustained.
I want to just direct your attention to the top of that page. That's from that same book in 1991, correct?
Yes?
And did you write in that book that you'd never met a prosecutor who was happy to see you in the courtroom?
Okay, I wrote that, yes.
Doctor, why?
Let me stop it for just a second to say something, make it really clear. I chop when I'm doing these excerpts because I'm trying to fit this all into our presentation. This is much shortened. There are lots of sentences and stuff that I cut out. In my opinion, it gives you the full gist, but I want you to know
Why would
that.
a prosecutor never be happy to see you in a courtroom?
If I'm, generally, if somebody is testifying as an expert for the defense, prosecutors come into this with a challenging, MO, and they are not usually that happy to see defense expert witnesses.
Sure. And I wanted to ask you about MOs. I guess you meant modus operandi? Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay. When you write a book called Witness for the Defense, does that show your MO?
Well, that.
Your Honor, I'm
because-
going to object that it's argumentative.
Well, it's argumentative, sustained.
So the prosecutor then took the witness through a list of the cases where she's testified or been hired as a consultant. And it was an impressive list of people who would basically be those you would not want to be associated with. Like if people were playing a party game, I say this word, what's the first word that comes to mind? And somebody says Michelle Troconis. This is a list of the names that you would not, if you were the defense, want people to come up with. Ted Bundy, Timothy McVeigh. She was a DNA consultant for O.J. Simpson. She worked with the Menendez brothers, Michael Jackson twice on his criminal cases, Phil Spector, Robert Dunst. It was a list, a lengthy list of people she had worked with. But the judge apparently believed that the prosecutor took it too far. Here's what happened.
You also worked on Jerry Sandusky's case, correct?
Primarily, I was working on behalf of the administrators at Penn State who were accused of maybe not doing more, you could say. But that was my primary work in the Penn State case. Then after their situation resolved and I was not in any kind of conflict, I did talk with Mr. Sandusky's defense attorneys, yes.
So that was a very long answer to a simple question.
Well, that's not a question. Now, what the court is going to do is this. The court understands zeal. The court understands the cut and thrust of cross. But what the court is not going to countenance is a lack of respect.
And then finally, this is what happened.
Doctor, is it fair to say that you have built a lucrative career coming into court and testifying in criminal cases?
It's fair to say that I'm compensated for my time, just as you are.
How much do you think I make $700 an hour?
We're going to take a recess because things are becoming unhinged. Recess.
And with that, there was a stop to the proceedings for a period of time. The judge took a break, everybody took a break, and came back with a lot fewer objections, a lot fewer objectionable questions, and the case proceeded. But it really descended quickly. So you have now seen sort of what occurred and how it reached the stage that the judge said something I've never heard before, which is a judge called the case unhinged. Never heard that. So I want to say thank you to a few people, to Tom23 and LMND93, and it's Spunky for gifting a lawyerly membership. And I want to especially thank SUs for gifting 50 lawyerly memberships. That is awesome. I'll be so glad to have so many new people joining us. I'm delighted to have you. And please put your favorite emoji in just to celebrate that you are now a member. So the next expert witness, and there were only two, was Dr. Marius from Northwestern University, who is a professor in communications and psychology and linguistics, cognition, thought, language, things like that. She talked about the fact that speaking in a language other than the native language taxes your cognitive function, your thinking function. Signs that you would look for would be broken grammar, shorter sentences, using only one tense like the present tense, or frequently saying or as we certainly know from having watched the interrogations. In Michelle's case, it would be We saw all of that with Michelle's interrogations. And the witness suggested this: ask yourself, is their proficiency in the language high enough that you would trust them, maybe hire them to represent your interests? And if the answer is no, then they aren't fully proficient. She called Michelle's proficiency in English a medium level. She said having a lower proficiency can affect your memory of specific events. She had not tested Michelle now. And like the first witness said, very little specific to Michelle, but she did say this: how proficient do you need to, this was a question the prosecution asked, how proficient do you need to be in a second language in order to lie? And the judge said, language doesn't determine the ability to lie. And the witness nodded just vehemently the whole time. Yes, that's right. This is not about lying. This is about the ability to communicate and to use your rational thinking as you do so. She said, in fact, that someone who's bilingual has been tested to be more honest in their second language than in their first language. I guess they have less ability to sort of craft the way things are said. My favorite question of the day was one that the prosecutor ended up withdrawing, but she started out, if someone were to commit a crime in English, and I just wondered, what does that mean exactly, committing a crime in English? I guess it could be like fraud or something like that, but most crimes, of course, are not in a language. So I thought that was, and she withdrew that. It wasn't a final question, but I thought it was pretty amusing. Probably at least half of the testimony that the defense put on that related to this case was a series of witnesses who were friends and work acquaintances of Fotis Dulos. And they were there primarily to say that Fotis believed the custody proceedings were finally moving in his direction, finally moving positively for him. For months, he had been unable to see his kids at all. Then he had been on supervised visitation. Michelle was not even allowed to be in their presence. But Fotis talked about a report that had come out, and this report had to do with the custody and with the mental capacity of Jennifer to be able to handle parenting. We don't know what it says. That report is not available to us. It hasn't been made public. It's the subject of a contempt issue that's going to be heard separately. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there wasn't anything specific about that case. We don't know exactly what that pleading, what that document, that report from a psychologist said, but it had something to do with Jennifer and her psychiatric condition. That's all that's been told to us about it. And what the defense says is, look, if things were going better for Fotis, if he was about to get custody, if he really was that confident that this report showed he was about to either win all custody or at least a major portion of it, at least 50%, why? Why would he now suddenly go out and kill Jennifer Dulos? What would be the reasoning for that? And so that's what these witnesses were there primarily to talk about. The first was Hutch Haynes. He ran the private membership water ski pond where Fotis and his kids hung out for years. The pond has 30 members, 30 families, and many of the people there compete professionally. They hang out together for hours, he said, during the 5 months the pond's open each year. Jennifer wasn't really into the skiing, Jennifer Dulos, but Michelle was. And Hutch said that before Fotis and Jennifer split, Jennifer Dulos rarely brought the kids. Usually the nanny brought them. But according to Hutch, the witness, Hutch Haynes, Fotis was really into his kids. Those children were his life, was a quote from him. But for some period of time, he had to admit Fotis didn't bring the kids. That's, of course, when he didn't have custody. Then in 2019, he started to tell Hutch that he was going to be skiing with the kids again. So Hutch and his wife went to Fotis's and Michelle's house for dinner the night before Jennifer disappeared. Fotis, he said, was really excited about making progress on the custody and said he thought he'd have the kids at the pond a lot more in the future. Even in hindsight, he said there was nothing unusual about the evening. Hutch did say he noticed that Fotis's hair was very short, but he'd seen that before. It didn't mean a lot to him. Hutch also confirmed Michelle's alibi. Hutch's wife had left her purse at the dinner the night before, and Michelle hand-delivered it to Hutch that morning. That means she was not in New Canaan participating in the murder of Jennifer Dulos. Hutch became emotional as he talked about how the state police searched the pond, which he called sacred ground, and put a boat in the water looking for the body. He described the police bringing in dogs for the search. And he said that Fotis said over and over, "I did not do this." Fotis also said that Jennifer had run away at some point earlier in her life and that she was doing it again. The next witness was Stefan Reich, a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker. He went into real estate at Fotis's suggestion and obtained all of the listings of the Ford Group. Now, Fotis brought him in as an employee at one point, we heard, because Fotis didn't like paying such big commissions, and then ultimately terminated him in December or January 2016, 2017, because the witness wouldn't sign a non-compete. So Fotis then gave most of his listings to somebody else, but ultimately brought them back. And Fotis did not discuss the custody exactly with Stefan, but the witness wasn't allowed to say what it is that Fotis actually did say. It was sort of inconsistent. Some witnesses talked about that. This witness really did not get to talk about that. But this witness was also at that dinner party the night before Jennifer disappeared. Fotis, he said, as they arrived at 5, was driving out, but was back shortly. He left one more time to go get meat for the party. But other than that, it was a positive, normal dinner party. And the defense's point, I think, is if this was such a pivotal night, the next day, Fotis is going to go and murder his wife, who parented 5 of his children. It's going to happen the very next day. Why would he be having such a normal, happy, ordinary dinner party the night before? And I think that's what the defense was trying to point out. Even in hindsight, the witness said nothing raised a red flag. The only point I felt like was made by the prosecution. Let me go ahead and add that to the stage, and I'm going to play it for you.
Okay, so you've been a part of the kids for a while when they were young.
I knew all the kids, yes.
Okay. Would you ever think Jennifer Dulos would have left her children?
No way.
And that's pretty strong. That was really strong, I thought. And they got that in on cross-examination, that would not be something that they would ever expect. He also talked about the fact that Jennifer's dad helped finance Ford Group, that he was instrumental in making Fotis Dulos' company successful. You know, during this examination, the judge was already, this was before the expert witness, and the judge was already getting a little upset about the questioning. I thought I'd put this in and let you see it.
And any part of the discussion that night talk about plans to murder Jennifer the next day?
No,
Any part of that discussion talk about plans to dispose evidence in garbage cans along Albany Avenue?
no,
Any part of that discussion involve plans about using the Toyota Tacoma and cleaning it afterwards?
no,
Okay, that's not something you discuss at a dinner party?
no.
Okay.
I'm going to object that last was argumentative and it's
Well, it's gratuitous,
gratuitous.
but that's not essentially a ground on which to object, but the jury knows the difference between a genuine question and questions that are gratuitous. So the court is not going to sustain the objection. The jury knows what it hears.
The next witness, or a witness, I may not have them in the exact order from the trial. Beth Reich is an executive at a medical device company. She's married to Stefan. While Fotis told them about some frustrating things from the judicial proceedings, she said that neither Stefan nor I would welcome negative commentary about Jennifer. They've been friends with Jennifer, so they would not have expected that, or she said they would not have welcomed anything negative. And she said Fotis didn't say anything negative about Jennifer. She mentioned a couple of things. For example, that when they came in, Michelle was speaking to herself in Spanish, which supported the defense suggestion that she was having trouble with the language, that Spanish was very much where her thinking was. And that Fotis mentioned that visitation with his children the night before and said it was very amicable. It had gone very well. He also made a toast, which she described.
What was the toast?
I don't know any words that were particularly said, but the general sentiment that I recall was a feeling of excitement that there was going to be positive resolution for them both during what I knew to be a very difficult custody battle, which despite which side you're on, it's very, very difficult for either parent and very difficult for the children. And the sentiment was that maybe this was going to end and there would be more peace.
Was there any negative comments whatsoever said about Jennifer during this dinner?
No,
Was the entire evening a positive and hopeful evening?
yes,
Was that true even after you finished the dinner?
yes,
Was that true after you finished the toast?
yes.
At any time, did you see Mr. Dulos act in any surreptitious or underhanded manner during that dinner?
No.
Anything that stood out as being odd?
Just that when we drove in, he was driving out and he almost seemed like he had forgotten we were coming.
Okay, but you said that that wasn't odd for him.
I don't know if I actually said that, but it's often that in my experience with men, if you're a host of something, you might forget sometimes.
Okay, and how was Michelle's attitude that evening, her demeanor during that dinner?
Engaging, friendly, positive.
At any time, did you see her act in any strange way or leave the room in any surreptitious way?
Not that I recall.
So the defense also brought in Michelle's hairstylist, Cheryl Briere. Now, Michelle came in on Saturday, May 25th. That is the day after Jennifer Dulos has disappeared. The night before, the police have been at their house to ask them, do you know where she is? They now know. This is the night after the trip around Hartford, which Michelle says was nothing, and the prosecutor, or at least not from her perspective, and which the prosecution says was when Fotis Dulos dumped bags of bloody clothing around Hartford, Connecticut. So, but this witness talked about the demeanor of Michelle the day after she has learned that Jennifer has disappeared, the morning after that. And this is what transpired. And I thought I left it, I wanted y'all to hear this because I thought it sort of perfectly epitomized the contrast, the way that a lot of this evidence can be interpreted two different ways. So I want you to hear it and then we'll talk about it.
Was she at this point happy or sad
No, she was always happy. She was happy.
on that day?
Yeah, yep, yep.
So that Saturday.
Now, this
would
is
have
the
been,
prosecution.
About Saturday Memorial Day weekend would have been about 5/25, 2019.
Yes.
Does that date sound right?
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay, and you worked between like 9 and 1?
Yes.
Ish? Okay, and Michelle Troconis came in to get her hair cut, that was your testimony? Or hair colored?
Yes,
Okay, and she was happy?
yes.
Okay, nothing further, thank you.
Nothing else.
So you can see how that works two different ways. On the one hand, the defense is saying, look, Michelle is happy because she doesn't think anything is seriously wrong. Jennifer's just taking a couple of days to be by herself. Michelle has no involvement in this. She had nothing to do with this disappearance. She doesn't even believe Jennifer's murdered yet or dead. So of course she's happy. The prosecution, on the other hand, will imply or suggest why is she happy? Because finally her rival, Jennifer Dulos, is out of the way. Now her boyfriend, Fotis, can have his children, she can be with the children, and they can be together in a more normal relationship. How you see the testimony all depends on what you already believe and who you already believe. The defense also put up attorney Michael Rose, the lawyer who represented Fotis Dulos in the divorce case. He had asked not to have to testify, and he had filed what's called a motion to quash. But the court said, I am not going to make you testify about any of the communications you had with your client, Fotis, because that would be privileged attorney-client communications, but you have to come and you have to talk in general. He said that while in January of 2019, Dulos was not allowed to see his children, by March of 2019, he was given structured visitation. They were now anticipating further proceedings. Things were going better. They were working toward more. He also talked about the first time, the only time, that Fotis saw that report by the person who did the report about Jennifer's psychological background and capacity. It was late April, about a month before Jennifer disappeared. And the witness said that he and Fotis went together to the office of the guardian ad litem. We also heard from attorney Meehan, the guardian ad litem representing the children's interests, and Meehan testified. So Meehan did not give attorney Rose and Fotis a copy of that custody report, but they were able to look at it. They couldn't even have their phones, he said, in case, someone were to take a picture. It was very private. But attorney Rose said Fotis was very happy about it. He seemed relieved and more optimistic than I had seen him in a while. After seeing that report, Fotis and attorney Rose filed a motion in the family court after reviewing it, again suggesting that the attorney is saying this was really good and we were looking forward to change. Then in May 2019, attorney Rose, this is right after this was filed, attorney Rose said he told Michelle, look, there's light at the end of the tunnel about this divorce and custody stuff. It's a long process, but there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. Things are going to return to normal. And she seemed really relieved. He also did mention the haircut that in mid-May, in other words, not a special haircut just done in order to murder Jennifer Dulos, but in mid-May, Fotis had already cut his hair in that really short way and commented to him in a text. They actually had a physical text, May 16th, in which they discussed the haircut. And he ribbed Fotis about how it looked really bad and he didn't look as good as he normally did. There was some important cross, I thought, that by May 24th, the day that Jennifer disappeared, even though this report had come out and even though this report supposedly really supported Fotis and he was really excited about it, nothing had changed. And Fotis still didn't have custody and Michelle still couldn't be allowed to be around the children and Fotis still had supervised visitation. So the idea I think that the prosecution is putting out is that Fotis was growing impatient. He no longer believed the report would make a difference. And that's why he went ahead and committed the murder. That's the prosecution narrative. There were a few other facts and I have a few more people I need to thank. Let me stop for a minute and then we will get into what the next witnesses said. So let's see, I think we stopped with S. Hughes. So we've got Shy Gal gifted a membership. Thank you very much. Janet, thank you, Janet. She thought of me when that happened about the objection. I appreciate that. I also got some comments from email and I appreciated that, people letting me know. And let's see, and Sammy, thank you for gifting a lawyerly membership. I really appreciate all of you doing that. We also got some brand new facts that came in around some of the defense witnesses. Not maybe necessarily brand new facts, but facts that the jury will be able to use in the course of deliberating. One fact, somebody asked me in the chat last Wednesday when we did our question time, somebody said, well, does the jury know that Fotis unalived himself? Do they know? And the answer is definitely yes. There were two sergeants from the Farmington Police Department who were put up. They were at the scene when Fotis was found nearly dead, but not quite dead. He did die 2 days later. What the defense really, really wanted to get in was the note he wrote. He left a note saying, I'm not guilty, Michelle's not guilty, Kent's not guilty, none of us are guilty. The judge did not let that note in, but one of the officers said something about Fotis having unalived himself, made that statement, and the amended death certificate said the death was by carbon monoxide intoxication. So I think the jury will put that together. I think someone will have heard the witness who said it was an unaliving, and then they'll put that with the death certificate and they will know that information. The second fact was there really was a next day showing at 80 Mountain Spring. that wasn't just made up by Michelle and Fotis to explain the numerous trips that Michelle made to 80 Mountain Spring and the cleaning supplies she took there. 80 Mountain Spring was a place that was under construction by the Ford Group, Fotis's company. And Michelle went there throughout the afternoon. She took cleaning supplies. Fotis was there all afternoon. The prosecution, I think, believes that something connected with Jennifer was going on, but there's not really any evidence. They scoured the area and they found nothing, not her body, nothing. They weren't able to put it all together in terms of whether Jennifer was there. But a real estate agent testified that she met with Fotis and saw Michelle on the morning of the 25th. That is the day after Jennifer disappeared. They both seemed normal. She then showed 80 Mountain Spring to some prospective buyers who were going to build a different home of their own. They didn't look in detail because they weren't looking to buy that house. They were just looking to see the kind of work that Fotis did. This was a more expensive, larger house than what they wanted to buy. And she said nothing was out of place at the house. It was empty, unoccupied home in a condition for showing. There were no trash, no garbage bags. It was in good shape. There was one important piece of cross. The witness Menudis texted Fotis Dulos 4 times the morning of the 24th, trying to set up the showing for the next day. And he finally texted her back at 1:33 p.m. Now, the prosecution says the reason for the delay is that he intentionally left his phone at the house while he went to New Canaan, an hour and 20 minutes south, to kill Jennifer Dulos. He did that because he didn't want to be traced. Now, the third fact was that back in July 2019, law enforcement was focused on Fotis, not so much Michelle. That's the reason I think that the defense put on Sergeant Christopher Allegro, a detective from the Connecticut State Police, who interviewed Pavel Gumieni. Pavel, he mentioned a few things. For example, he did talk about citizenship concerns. The police said, well, look, we could have called immigration, but we haven't. He said Pavel at that time did not have a cooperation agreement. He didn't have any kind of immunity that he was getting, and he was just answering questions. He said he doesn't recall Pavel saying anything about Michelle or being asked about Michelle. There was another witness. I honestly have no idea why the defense put this in. I definitely want to hear your ideas. Please put this in the chat. I normally stay over here so I can deal with super chats, but I'm going to go over here. I want your opinion. I am really at a loss. The witness was Henry Thomas French Jr. He lives at 6 Jefferson Crossing, that same road where Fotis Dulos lived. In fact, Fotis built his house before he built the one where he lives. At 4 Jefferson Crossing is where Fotis and Michelle lived. 6 Jefferson Crossing is where the witness lived. He said that on May 24, 2019, he saw Fotis Dulos jogging between 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Now, that's after they finished at 80 Mountain Spring and before they drive to Starbucks in Hartford and throw out the trash bags. He said he didn't recall seeing him jog before, that he looked haggard, in distress, very unusual, almost shuffling, he said. And it was so remarkable that he told his wife and his daughter about it afterwards, that Fotis was all alone as he was doing this jog, which he had never seen him jog before, and looking so really upset. Why is that something the defense wants to put on? Why are they putting that on instead of the prosecution maybe saying Fotis looked haggard because he had killed somebody that day? So I was mystified as to why that came in, and more particularly, why the defense put that in. So I'm going to look real quickly and see if anybody had an answer, because I am at a loss on that, and we've got a little bit more to go. So I don't know. I'll have to read back through these later on, because I don't know. I don't get that one. And hopefully y'all will have provided the answer to me, because I've been puzzling over that. And I want to thank Lydia for the super sticker. Thank you. The next witness, I think this is the final one, except for an exhibit. Yep, this is the final one. Clara Duperon. She lives in Connecticut, but she's originally from Argentina, as Michelle is. Although I thought Michelle was from Venezuela. Anyway, Michelle and she have been friends since 2017. Fotis was unable to see his kids. Michelle expressed frustration with that, but she never said anything, called Jennifer bad names or anything like that. And she talked about a Greek Easter party, which Fotis and Michelle had about April 28th, they thought was about the date. And that Fotis talked about this custody report, that it was in his favor and he was happy. He was now going to have custody of the kids. Things were going well. She threw in a bunch of different little facts, like, for example, that Michelle had fires in the fireplace, even when it was warm outside. She's part of Michelle's alibi because Michelle and Clara met on the morning Jennifer disappeared to talk about rugs that Michelle was selling at Clara's shop. And they talked all day long on the day of Jennifer's disappearance. We know even when Fotis and Michelle were in Hartford driving around with Fotis dumping those bloody clothes out in trash bags, that Michelle was talking to her friend. She said that this friend said that by Monday, when Jennifer still hadn't returned, Michelle was very upset and worried because Jennifer had disappeared. She said that she and Michelle speak in Spanish just because it's easier. And she also said that and we heard this from numerous witnesses, and it's sort of a strange fact, again, a strange fact for the defense. In early April or May, Michelle was planning to move to Vail, Colorado. Well, Fotis wasn't moving to Vail, Colorado, at least as far as we know, which sounds like Michelle was planning to leave him. We've had numerous witnesses say that she had talked about moving to Colorado. She told the interrogators, yeah, I told him, forget it, I'm moving to Colorado. I don't even like Connecticut. She said that during, this has not gone well. I'm sorry I ever moved here. So we've heard that. I don't know if that really helps the defense, because it would explain why Fotis might want to kill Jennifer so he wouldn't lose Michelle. There was a suggestion of that, but why would it prove Michelle was not involved? How would it suggest that? I'm not really clear on that. Now, on cross, the state got into a point I think they may have regretted going there. They wanted to say that the witness had refused to talk to the police, but she got in a lot of facts around that. She said that the police had not bothered to contact her for 700 days after Jennifer disappeared, more than 2 years. And by that time, well, that's not quite more than 2 years, is it? By that time, she said she was happy to truthfully answer by email. And she said that was because she was better with the language in writing. And she told them that they were either incompetent, and she said she didn't think that was it, or the police just didn't want to hear the other side. She said she had information that would hurt the state's case, but if they wanted to talk to her, they were going to need to get a subpoena. Now, the prosecution pointed out, well, that might not make a lot of sense in that it wouldn't help Michelle. Why would she keep information that would hurt the state's case private? If it helped Michelle and she wanted to help Michelle, she would come forward with it. But I think the overall impression the jury would be left with is that this witness truly believed that the police were very biased against Michelle. And then it all ended with a whimper, not a bang, not with a bang, but a whimper, as T.S. Eliot said. It was a huge point, but all that happened was the jury saw an exhibit on the Elmo screen, and that was it. I don't think they fully even understand what it said yet. There have been discussion about it with another witness, but this is a really important point to the defense. They submitted a document. We'd heard about this earlier. It said that Jennifer had 2 phone numbers, and one of them connected to her Chevy Suburban at 7:16 a.m. That would make sense. She's in the house. She's about to take the kids to school. And at 2:56 p.m. Now, that's as close to the Gone Girl scenario as it comes. If Jennifer has been dead for hours and her body is somewhere in New Canaan or Farmington or somewhere in between, and Fotis is in Farmington, hours away, and everybody acknowledges that, the red truck is all the way up in Farmington, an hour and 20 minutes away. Everybody acknowledges that. Who has her phone to connect to her car, which is down in New Canaan, an hour and 20 minutes south of where everything else is, the red truck, Fotis, Michelle, everybody. How does it connect at 2:56 p.m.? And that's an important point for the defense. They say, well, it must have been Jennifer. She must have had her phone and it connected. The judge would not have the defense take it down. It got pretty contentious, said, you'll take it down because it's not in evidence, the judge said. Because it is in evidence. And said, counsel will not turn the page. You'll take the document back over to the clerk. And it got pretty contentious. The defense counsel explained that they had subpoenaed the officer who was going to read it, but the prosecution asked them to just use the document instead because there was some reason why the witness, they didn't want him to come. And the defense agreed to that. The judge said, well, look, you can argue this in closing. And I guarantee you, we will definitely hear about that. Who did not testify? Now, that's a list of who did testify for the defense, but who didn't? Michelle Troconis, she did not testify. That had been my best guess because in many ways she did testify. She already has testified in this sense. The jury saw hours and hours of interrogation of Michelle. She made her very best case during those interrogations. I don't think there was anything more she could have said that would have been more appealing. And I think that's why she elected not to testify. So what is coming next? Monday will be argument on the jury charges where just the attorneys, the judge, Michelle will be there, but not the jury. Then on Tuesday, closing arguments, and the jury will finally get the case and get a chance to deliberate. The judge has said he's going to read the charges to the jury and give them individual copies of the whole charge. All of the exhibits are going to be in the jury room with them for them to look at, consider, view, all of that. The defense briefly tried renewing their motion for acquittal. They just stood up and said, we made the motion for acquittal again, same arguments, and judge said, same ruling, no. So that's how it moved. As for the contempt charge, we did get some more information about the way it's going to proceed. The judge said, calling it a non-summary contempt proceeding, said he's going to have to pass that to another judge. He can't be the person who will actually hear it. The judge will order Michelle to appear for the contempt hearing, and an attorney named Frost is going to represent her, and another judge will actually hear that. It's going to be on March 5th. And he made a comment at the end. I don't know if other counsel may appear. That may have to be discussed with counsel. I wasn't sure what he meant, or if he meant that more than one person would be asked to appear and discuss what had happened. It may be that the attorneys would be asked to appear as well, at least as witnesses. So I forgot to say, put your questions in and hurry, because I've gone a long time on this one, but I was summarizing testimony that started on Wednesday and went all the way through today. So it was a lengthy, large amount of testimony, and I try to get it all in under an hour, so you can just watch that. But put your questions in, and then while you're doing that, I want to say thank you to Zero Patience. I like that title, Zero Patience. Thank you for the super sticker. And also to Patricia Marie. I appreciate it. And Patricia is thinking that this was a strategic plan by Fotis and Michelle Troconis, but that they made mistakes. And you are with the prosecution. The prosecution definitely agrees with you on that, Patricia. I appreciate that super chat very much. All right, so let me take a look over here at the questions that are coming in. I'm real curious what y'all thought about everything and what you are wondering about. So let's take a look at questions. Nurse Riley wants to know, do we know the murder weapon? We do not. And that's a pretty big missing piece, isn't it? Not only no body, but no real understanding. There was talk, and the prosecution talked about this, about the fact that their blood spatter suggested there were 2 blows. That's what was suggested, 2 blows. I felt like the testimony wasn't quite that crystal clear on that, but that was what the prosecution is arguing. but blows with what? Not really known. I gathered they don't think it was a gunshot, but without, and one reason for that might be there was no hole in Michelle Troconis's shirt. We initially saw one. We had commented on it on the channel, but it turned out the witness said she had cut that piece of fabric out for testing to determine whether this would be linked by blood and DNA to Jennifer Dulos, which it was. So that shirt didn't have, say, a bullet hole in it. So that's probably one of the other reasons that they would think that. Susan wants to know, I heard that the custody report was biased because the doctor didn't meet Jennifer and wouldn't actually help Fotis. You know, it's all a black box, Susan. It's really unknown. The things that we know are that we heard that Jennifer actually selected the person who would do the work. And I think it was Pavel Gumieni who testified that Fotis said that Fotis was really concerned because Jennifer got to pick, and that seemed unfair to him. He thought, wow, I got no shot at this then if the person who is actually doing the selection is Jennifer, she's going to pick somebody who's in her favor. So he was surprised then when it came out in his favor. You know, could it be that the report wouldn't help him? I think there have been so many people he told he thought it would help, and Attorney Rose suggested the same thing. So did the guardian ad litem, Meehan. I think that it probably would have helped him, but apparently not as quickly as he thought. Maybe not even as much as he thought. So that remains something that not only is a mystery, but always will be, since that report is not being released. It was what was on Michelle Troconis' screen, and that she's being considered charged with contempt on. That's the March 5th that we talked about. All right, let's see what else. So I see somebody saying that Nicole, her child, was accepted to a school in Vail. And that totally makes sense that that would be a reason to move to Vail as opposed to somewhere else. It was more that she wanted to move. She seemed to really want to move. I'm leaving you. I'm going to Colorado. There seemed to be some suggestion about that. And if he wasn't going to go, even if it was to take her daughter to a school, it seemed as if she planned to leave him. At least there was some suggestion that it was on the table. So LNMD wants to know about that call from Fotis's friend. What was that all about? Yes, indeed. The call from Andreas, the Greek friend, that came in at the opportune moment, and Michelle answered it. The prosecution says this was all a way of creating an alibi. By having Michelle answer the phone, it would look like Fotis must have been at his house that morning, and the alibi was created by the phone being answered at the house. So Fotis just left his phone at the home while he went down to commit the murder. That was exactly the argument that was being made. What was it about? Unknown. It was only 17 seconds with Michelle, and then came the meme. If you don't know about the meme, you've got to watch the video I did on that. I'll link it at the end. As soon as YouTube finishes processing this video and I'm allowed to link something, I will do that. Scooter says it's their new favorite channel. Thank you. I'm so glad. And Ada is wanting to know where something was heard, but I don't know. She's asking Susan. Uh-oh, did I go too far back? Here we go. Okay, Pammy, can you do a poll on guilty, not guilty? I don't yet know how to do polls. We are working on that. There can be a poll in YouTube. I'm not coming to you from YouTube. I'm coming through a streaming service. And so I don't yet know, but we are working on that. Both Marlon and Mama Pinks have said, need to figure out a way to do polls. So we will work on that. I may not do guilt or innocence just because the jury hasn't had a chance to consider it yet. I may not take it that far, but I really do want to do a poll. There's so many questions I have about what y'all think and what some of your opinions are. So I will definitely give some thought to that and be working on that. Oh, I see. I went way too far back. So I'm missing all of your more recent questions. I'm zipping down. Don't worry. I am hurrying. Do you think the judge has been favoring the state more than the defense, says Muriel? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Very much so. That has definitely been my impression. So I wasn't going to say that. I mean, but that is the truth. That is exactly what I think. I feel like that has been throughout the case. And as I understand it, this judge was a criminal defense lawyer, so he has lots of experience. So he may just be tougher on them because he knows what he expects and what he demands. So that may be more what it was. All right, let's see. Okay. Forever Redhead, are closing arguments timed or can defense take all day? I am guessing they're timed, but I didn't hear anything about that. And I wondered the same thing. For example, when the judge told him, well, you can argue that in trial. You can make that argument in closing argument. You don't have to have somebody read through the document and sort of explain to the jury what they're seeing on that last document. I thought, yeah, but he doesn't want to take the time to do that. He just wants to throw it up there and say, look, as you heard from the last witness at 2:51, her phone connected. This shows us that she was still alive. He wants to be able to do that without having to take up time. I'm assuming the judge will have some time limits. It would be a surprise to me if it was just, take all day if you want. That would be a surprise. Susan wants to know, were any of Jennifer's children present in the gallery? I heard something about them being present as her grandmother testified, but I don't know that. I don't know for sure one way or the other. Kathy, can Michelle walk out of court on bond even if found guilty? I don't know what the exact procedure will be. I've wondered about that myself. Often they are immediately taken into custody upon a finding of a guilty verdict. Would the judge do it differently? For example, in federal court, that's not the way it is. There's a period of time, there's a sentencing hearing, and there's time. So I don't know which way it would work in this particular case. Sandy Jules, so attorney-client privilege extends beyond the grave. That was definitely a question that was raised during the hearing. Could Fotis Dulos still have an attorney-client privilege if he's no longer alive, or is it gone because he's no longer alive? And my presumption is that the answer, certainly in Connecticut, is the attorney-client privilege does extend beyond the grave because the judge was enforcing it. But there was discussion a little bit about that. So it's not, that must be what it is in Connecticut. Susie wants to know, why did she put that on her computer for the gallery? Why? I can't really answer that. There's another argument, though, that suggests that it must be really positive for Fotis. If she thought it was worth trying to show it to the world, trying to show it to the gallery, she must have thought it was positive for her / positive for showing that Fotis didn't commit the murder. That must be the case. So Cognac Hobo asked me, if Michelle's acquitted and Jennifer's body is subsequently found proving she took part in the murder, she can't be retried because of double jeopardy. It is true that we have, and Cognac Hobo is asking from the UK perspective, and apparently you don't have double jeopardy there. So there is, we do have double jeopardy here in the United States, that you can't be tried for the same offense twice. If she was found innocent, she could not be tried for the exact same offense again. Would there be other offenses they could find her guilty of? Maybe. Could there be some federal implication? Maybe. And so there might be a nuance to it, Cognac, that would allow her to be retried. But in general, the rule is you cannot be retried for the same offense, even if the body's found, even if there's some kind of new information, which is why the prosecution waits until they marshaled all the evidence before they bring their case. So Meredith wants to know about the language proficiency of Michelle, because they did bring in a witness who also spoke Spanish and who had a heavy accent, more so, frankly, I thought, than Michelle, and about whether or not she didn't testify without a translator. I think the entire point is this: they are proficient in English, both of them. They would at least probably hit that medium level that the expert witness talked about. But the big question was not, are they proficient in English, in that can they speak and converse in English? Can people understand them? But can Michelle Troconis be held to a very high level of every word she said during the interrogation when she's trying to do it in a different language? Could that have affected what she said, how they perceived her, her memory? Could all of those things have been changed or altered because of the language barrier? And I think that's more the argument they're making. And in terms of court, they're saying, there's a difference between testifying in someone else's trial and being on trial for conspiracy to murder someone. And in that case, you want absolutely perfect interpretation of everything. You don't want to miss a nuance because this is your life on trial. And I think that's probably what was being said. So I'm going to head over to make sure there are no questions over here. Okay, so Mandy Strong has a question for me. Unless I missed something, I've seen no evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. And Mandy wants to know what she missed on that. From what the prosecution said in the judgment of acquittal period and what the judge said, actually, this is the reason he denied it. Some of the things like she was sitting in the car with Fotis as he threw out the bags that had bloody clothes, the fact that she answered the phone that possibly could have meant something related to an alibi for Fotis, the fact that she took cleaning supplies to 80 Mountain Spring, all of those could have been her participation in doing this. And that's what the suggestion from the prosecution is. That's, I think, what they're talking about. So thank you very much for that. And I want to thank Mr. RN for the super sticker. That does remind me that there was, Nancy, I don't think I thanked Nancy for her super sticker on Wednesday. So thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. So let me head back over. I'm going to do, I think, 2 more questions and then I'm exhausted. So let's head down to the very bottom and see where some of there's one with red question marks from Patty Broomfield. Well, now I can't find it. Okay. I'll just take the first couple. Who has the children now? Sherry Wilson wants to know. It is Jennifer Dulos's mother. Also with them, the nanny who testified. She has been with them for years now. She had worked for the Dulos family for years before Jennifer disappeared, and now she's been with the family for 4 more years, which is, I think, awesome because it gives the children some stability to have their grandmother, to have the nanny who's been with them so long, because it is absolutely devastating what they've been through. They've lost both their mother and father in the just terrible circumstances. So you can certainly understand that. Bossy Texas chick wants to know, what does that mean, not streaming through a service and not YouTube? So what I'm using StreamYard as opposed to going through YouTube. StreamYard lets me put in exhibits and video that I can show you more easily. And so that's why I use that instead of going straight through YouTube. So StreamYard hooks to YouTube. How all that happens is beyond me, but that's what I mean by that. And let's see, I'll do one more. Anna B wants to know, did the police hurt the investigation by continuing to interrupt Michelle? They were heavy-handed and not listening. She dropped numerous red flags on Fotis. They just didn't get them. Anna B, I think that's going to be one of the things that is one of the things that has made it more difficult for people to resolve this case. In a lot of the cases that I do, it's pretty heavy, one-sided, and I would say there's probably more one-sided in this case, but this case has more people who are on both sides, I think, than the average. And one of the reasons, I think, is because when we heard those interrogations, it did seem like the police were being very heavy-handed. They were refusing to hear her or listen to her. And sometimes it's difficult to understand, why did they pick Pavel as the one they were going to believe and not Michelle? How did that come about? Why was that decision made? So I do think that I don't know if hurt the investigation is exactly the right word, but I think it affects how people perceive the case, which I think is somewhat torn. I don't think people are 100% one-sided or the other. That's at least been just my perception from watching everybody. So, all right, Monday at 7 p.m., we will be going live and we will be covering out. I'll probably say something about the charge conference that happens that day. We'll probably cover that at least a little bit. But what we are mostly going to cover is the final interrogation of Michelle Troconis. Lots of really important details in that. And I want us to talk through it. So you'll have all of that before we go into the closing arguments on Tuesday morning. I want to thank so much all of the people who have given me super chats. Let's see, we had Marlon, LNMD 93, Tom 23, I'll probably miss somebody, Mitt Spunky, Amber, Jackie, Curious Me, S. Hughes, thank you for the 50 Lawyerly memberships. I really appreciate that. Was awesome. And let's see, Janet, Posse Vibes, Shy Gal, gosh, so many. I'm really appreciative. Sammy G, Lydia, Zero, Patience, Patricia Marie, Mr. RN, and Mandy Strong. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank Marlon and Mama Pinks, who have done a fabulous job. It's a crowded chat tonight, and I really appreciate what they've done. Don't forget Monday at 7 p.m. I will see you then. Prosecution showed it to jury, and so you can get a pretty good look at it too. Red blood-like substance on it. He said it was even wet and leaking everywhere. That was a quote. Zip ties, a razor blade. Why were these items there? And in the back window is a bobblehead of Alec Murdoch going back and forth.